Well, that's a tough act to follow. I admire Bob. Bob makes me feel like Kobe Bryant. Rest in peace, Kobe, and let me explain how. So Kobe grew up watching Michael Jordan, and that was his idol. That's who you idolized in the 80s and 90s if you wanted to play basketball, right? Well, I got into Chinese human rights during law school and then set up my practice. And if you do what I do, eventually you're going to read all kinds of reports. You're going to see, oh, this cool organization, China Aid, has a lot to do with these reports. And inevitably, you find out who Bob is. He becomes your hero. And to be able to work with him to some extent and to do a panel, I feel like Kobe when he was around Michael Jordan, who took him under his wing. So thank you, Bob, for all these opportunities to serve. How do Bob and I work together, and how am I privileged to be here? Bob pulls off miracles. And a lot of this panel has been focusing, as it should, on how dangerous the CCP is and the effect that it has on the world and how and why we should contain them. And Bob, obviously he's very aware of that and he pushes the message as well, but he helps those who are victimized by that regime. He pulls off miracles through his organization, through China Aid, through his vast connections, and he manages to get them here, usually on what's called humanitarian parole. That is a temporary status, and these people don't want to return. Once they come here through Bob and China Aid's assistance, they want to remain here, and usually that's done through something called asylum. Asylum is international protection, which has been codified under American law as well, and that is a form of protection that allows you to stay here. And the cool thing about it is you can stay here with your spouse, with your children under the age of 21, or if you applied while the children were under 21 and it took years to get settled, they can also stay here with you. If your spouse or children were left behind in China or whatever country you came from, they're able to petition for them as well. And so Bob brings them and we help them stay here. So how does somebody get asylum? Well, they have to prove that they were persecuted or they will be persecuted on account of or because of 5 protected grounds. So it has to be one of these 5. And so first is political opinion. And talking about China, one, obviously political opinion, you're a dissident, you go on Twitter, you go on Tiananmen, anything like that, you are a political dissident, you'll get punished for that opinion. A interesting prong that was created in 1996 by our Congress was victims of the one child or the family planning policy. If anybody had been forced to have an abortion or sterilization or suffered any kind of abuse, they put that into the political opinion prong as well, because judges were confused. Well, what prong is this? We feel really bad for these women who suffered these atrocities, but is it a political opinion? Now it is. So that also includes people that were persecuted, and it's still open. A lot of question we get is, oh, it's a 3-child policy now, it's been loosened, but not eradicated. And so there are still reports, the latest Department of State report, that there has been forced abortions to force women in compliance if they were pregnant with a 4th or 5th child. So that still goes on, and because of that, past victims can still get asylum here. So political opinion is ground number 1. Ground number 2 is religion. Okay, you're persecuted because of your religion. So Bob did a great job of explaining what's happening in China with Christians. And in terms of China cases, the religion we most represent definitely would be Christians. We've also represented Falun Gong practitioners, Muslims, etc. But Christians are going through a really hard time in China right now, to say the least. Who wants to worship in a place like that? And so they can't stand it. They'll go to an underground or family church in somebody's apartment, and inevitably they'll get busted and they'll get jailed and many tortured. And they have all kinds of crimes that they can slap you with, and they love subversion of state power, like Bob mentioned with Wang Yi. That's just anything that makes the Chinese government lose face and feel intimidated, pretty much. So religion is definitely a big one. We'll talk more about it. Number 3 is race. Because of your race, you were persecuted. The Uyghurs can allege that as well. The Uyghurs actually are a group that they can allege all 5 grounds, as you can see. Number 4 is nationality. So this is an interesting one. Nationality, sometimes there are nations within a nation, and people like the Uyghurs or like the Tibetans or like the Kurds in the Middle East, they feel a certain national identity, and many of them would like to be independent from the bigger country, so you're being persecuted because of that opinion, because of that identity. And the last one, you're a member of a particular social group. And so for lawyers, if we see you don't fit in the first four, we try to squeeze you in the fifth one, which is particular social group. That is, if you have any kind of immutable characteristic or something that's socially distinct about you that you cannot change or you should not be required to change. And so obviously, religion could fit in there, but we don't need it because we have a separate prong for that. We use this for people that come from a certain tribe or even people who have an experience that they cannot change. For example, there's a case law that says, and we've used it, former police officers. A big one is actually victims of domestic violence. We're able to fit them in that fifth prong. So that's actually really nice. And so it's a really tough time right now for people in China who are worshiping and being Christians. And through Bob's help, and Bob, this might be the first time in history you'll confirm with me, but through Bob's help, a whole church got humanitarian parole. Bob brought over the Mayflower Church, okay? This was a group of 64 practitioners who voted when they saw that things were getting really tight with the religious regulations passing in 2017, 2018. They said, forget it. The majority of them left. First, they went to Korea, and they tried asylum there, but Korea has a passage rate of asylum of 1% or even less. It's insane. So many legitimate cases will not get asylum in Korea, and all 64 of them were denied in Korea. And I said, okay, let's take our chances to Thailand and with the United Nations. So they went to Thailand, and in Thailand, they were actually intimidated. Unfortunately, the CCP has certain pool in Thailand, and they convinced authorities to arrest them for being there without status, even though they had pending asylum applications. They were being taken to a detention center, but they resisted, and Bob and his miracle and his connections got them humanitarian parole, and they were able to land in our shores. And I'm the lucky guy and lucky firm who's getting to represent the Mayflower Church. What a privilege. And so how does somebody like that get asylum, right? Because were they persecuted, right? And between you and me, as lay people, I take off the lawyer hat, yeah, of course they were persecuted. They were harassed. Cops went in the church and detained the pastor, detained some of the leaders. Of course, that constitutes persecution to my heart and to my soul. But immigration officers and judges, they see it a little bit differently, part of because case law kind of forces them. Some of them take it a little bit too far. Persecution under asylum law is a very high standard. It has to be more than harassment. It has to be something pretty terrible. So having the police barge your church, that in and of itself would not constitute persecution. Of course, if it happens all the time, then we can argue under asylum law that in the aggregate, joining those experiences together, this experience isolated would not constitute persecution, but if all together in the aggregate, it could constitute persecution. But not all the judges buy it. They want to see something more concrete. So, for example, if you haven't been jailed and really tortured, how would you win asylum? Through something called establishing a well-founded fear of persecution. And so that's what it means. It means that I have a fear of going back, and there's a chance that if I go back, I'm going to get tortured because of one of the 5 grounds. It can't be a business dispute, but you try to argue a mixed motive. It's a business dispute, but he doesn't like that I'm a Christian. Okay, we're back in the game, right? So we make these arguments. So well-founded fear, our Supreme Court has said that it has to be a 10% probability of persecution. Not too bad, 10%, right? But in reality, we treat it like 90% because not all immigration officers see it the same way. Not all immigration judges see it the same way. The burden really is on us, and to really prove it, 90%, prepare. I always tell my clients, let's prepare as if we're facing the toughest judge or the toughest prosecutor. Yes, there is immigration court, and there is a prosecutor, a lot of times challenging, a lot of times saying, we want this client out. It can be very challenging, but it's a good fight, and that's what we live for. Bob, you're going to remember this case. Talking about the burden and talking about how some prosecutors will challenge everything. So we had a case, and Bob was gracious enough to join as an expert witness. Usually they don't even call the witness, especially after they see the testimony and the reports and the witness's affidavit, and they realize who the witness is. It's enough for a grant. But this prosecutor in a very powerful state in southern United States was really going after it, challenging everything to the point where it was so ridiculous. And then finally, and the judge is kind of smirking at me. He's like, okay, just let her do her job. And then she was challenging whether or not Bob Fu, a human rights powerhouse, was an expert in immigration, in human rights law. And I said, okay, I could call Bob to the stand. Let's have some fun. And after 5 minutes, the judge was like, this is ridiculous. Let's move on. This man's clearly an expert, right? So it can be an uphill battle. I always tell my clients the 90-10 rule. 10% is what the Supreme Court says, but 90% is what we really need to be going for here. So we fight that fight, and we prove how things are happening in China and why these people would be similarly situated. So, for example, like the Mayflower Church, not only are they here, but there's media articles about them, and the Chinese government has clearly lost face, and they oppose the Chinese government. So clearly, the Chinese government would apply the principle, in Chinese it's called 瞎鸡给猴看. I mess around with some Mandarin as well. It's something I do on my side. I'm able to speak to my clients in Mandarin. I love it. And 瞎鸡给猴看 means kill the chicken and make the monkey watch. Right? So who's the chicken? It's the big troublemaker, and you make the monkey, you make the Chinese citizens watch and say, if you dare do this, here's what's going to happen to you. Right? Like that. Yeah, so 瞎鸡给猴看 is what the Mayflower Church and other practitioners who were not necessarily persecuted according to asylum law, they were scared to death, but it doesn't qualify, but because of what they've done and the attention that they've drawn and their commitment to Christianity and how the Chinese government perceives them to be that threat when they come back, 瞎鸡给猴看, that's what's going to happen to them. And, Bob painted an excellent picture of what Xi Jinping continues to do, and not only with religion, but any kind of political dissident. I mean, you have people that post tweets, and all of a sudden, in a few minutes, they get a knock, and they know that this person has posted, and they will call you for an interrogation, and, depending on the officer you get, you will get tortured as well. It's actually very scary. And the way they call you in, they say, 我们要请你喝茶. We're going to invite you to drink tea, but it's not bubble tea, my friends. It's in an office. There might not even be tea, and it's going to be a very intimidating experience. And something that makes me very sad about China is that there's no judicial independence there, right? I mean, we know that through corruption, that already destroys any kind of true judicial independence that there's going to be. But also, they're going about it a very clever way and disastrous. They're arresting lawyers. And so there's a famous crackdown. It was called 709, because on July 9th, 2015, they arrested 300 human rights lawyers. And so it's very hard to get justice when you have a case. You're a Falun Gong practitioner, a Christian, you want to sue the government, or you want to, do something to get justice, and your lawyer won't take your case, not because he doesn't believe you, but because he doesn't want to lose his license and go to jail and get tortured. And that is exactly, even though it happened in 2015, it's a significant one because the trend has continued, and we have lawyers that are still detained to this day. Among them, somebody that we continue praying for, Mr. Gao Zhiseng. Gao Zhiseng was one of the best human rights lawyers in China, protected Christians, Falun Gong practitioners. They didn't like him very much. They sentenced him once to 3 years, but that wasn't enough. And Gao continued doing his thing when he came out, and so they detained him again and again. And the last time, he disappeared in 2018, although there are reports that he's in, I believe, Shaanxi province somewhere, just holed up. And his family hasn't seen him since 2018. One of his relatives wanted to do an internship at my law firm, and I says, it's going to be a little traumatic for you. No, let me try it. And she's like, no, this is traumatic. It reminds me too much of what's happening to my relative. So really a very sad situation. And like Bob says, really what we're seeing with this kind of behavior, just destroying all segments of Chinese society and any hopes for them getting protection, it's really going down the tubes. It's not like the time of maybe Hu Jintao where there was hope of moderation. That hope is gone, and they're going to continue doing what they can to push that agenda. And yeah, I've had the opportunity to obviously represent other countries as well in asylum. And we see that a lot of these countries that send asylum seekers is the country that has decided to limit people's free speech and to start punishing people for rebelling against democracy, whatever that means. And so when you start defining whatever opposition to democracy is, you start getting in a lot of trouble. And unfortunately, I also have cases from Brazil. I say unfortunately because I was born there. I was naturalized. I was brought here 35 years ago by this man recording me here, Felipe Alexandre. Let me get a little round of applause for my pops. Thank you for bringing me here. Very grateful. And so what's happening in Brazil is that the Supreme Court there, they essentially are judge, jury, and executioner, and they're going after people who are against democracy, in other words, against them, right? And I'm going to put her on the spot. I'm going to give a shout out to my friend Ludmila Lins. There she is right there. If you haven't spoken to her, go learn about her story. She has a great Instagram account which the Brazilian government is actively trying to shut down. She is a former judge. Why former judge? Because she was removed from the bench after speech that the party there and the Supreme Court didn't like very much, and so she lost her profession. She lost her ability to make a living. She didn't want to immigrate. She had a good life there, but people like her are being forced out, and this kind of thing is going on in Brazil. So I hope Google what's happening in Brazil. Go talk to Ludmila. Brazil definitely needs some help too, and. I'm happy to have this kind of audience. I'm happy that we're in this fight together, and I'm confident that you're going to continue doing what you can in your countries so that human rights are respected. And I hope to not represent any of your citizens in an asylum proceeding. Of course, if they want to do an investor visa and create jobs in America, we're not going to say no. Give us a call. Thank you. All right, take care.